Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lazaga, here with Dubside.
And you're listening to the Dubcast with Dubside.
So, did you have a good Thanksgiving, Dubside?
Yes, I did. I actually was hanging out with people. I didn't go kayaking. I used to back in Philadelphia. I used to go kayaking on Thanksgiving because that was a good time to do it. And I remember paddling along the river, and you could see into people's houses sometimes. You see the window open with the lights on. You say they must be in there eating Thanksgiving dinner, but I'm out here kayaking. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, I love doing that. Paddling right along the shoreline, and no one knows you're there.
Yeah.
Especially at night. Well, I was thinking about your last Dubcast with your story about the TV reality show crew. It would be interesting to see how that final product turned out.
Yeah. I didn't even get the name of what the show it was or anything, so I haven't been able to find out if it ever even did air or anything.
You don't watch a lot of television, do you?
Correct.
Tell us that story about how you stopped watching when you were 12 years old.
Did I ever tell you that story? I was 12 years old, and I heard about some study on the news where they took typical Americans and had them stop watching TV. They were going to voluntarily stop watching TV for a year. And then they would just, the study would be, how that impacted their social lives, et cetera. And the story said that none of them could do it. In fact, the guy who went the longest didn't even make 6 months. So I'm 12 years old, and I said to myself, I bet I can do that. So I did. I didn't watch TV until I think it was I was invited to my college roommate's house and didn't want to be too antisocial, so I watched a football game. But it was like 7 years of not watching TV through my whole teenage existence.
Wow.
And it was sort of isolate you socially, because people would have these in school would have these conversations about some TV show, and I just had no idea what they were talking about. But I got really into it, that how addictive television is, and how I think I converted one of my brothers to my cause, but nobody else in my family would even go my way. They would watch TV. So I had all these little rules about, if I walk into a room and a TV is on, I would quickly run out of the room. I couldn't even gaze at it in order that would be watch TV, so I would run out of the room. And it got pretty awkward. I going to somebody else's house, and how come he just ran out of the room? What's his problem?
Well, that just shows incredible discipline. I'm impressed.
Well, I tend to get obsessive about those sorts of things sometimes.
And I'm sure you're a better person for it.
I guess so. Yeah, I have a friend, one of my kayak friends, who says that it's got me analyzed as was that obsessive compulsive?
Obsessive compulsive disorder?
OCD, right?
Yeah, OCD.
But I say, no, it's OCO. It's an obsessive compulsive order, because I use it to my benefit. I have really good willpower not to, eat things I don't want to eat or do things I don't want to do.
I agree. I just embrace it.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to get on with the next episode.
And this one is about paddling at night. Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 36, Kayaking at Night. Reasons for trying it, and tips on how to do it, and stories about it. And I'll follow that with a song called Kimmernaq. If you remember back in Dubcast number 7, I described the character from Greenlandic folklore, the Kimmernaq. So this is a song called Kimmernaq. More about that later. On the planet Earth, at the extremes of latitude, there is a meteorological phenomenon known as
the Aurora Borealis, or in the southern hemisphere, it's the Aurora Australis. And in the U.S., we call it the Northern Lights. And this is characterized by streaks of red and green light. Can be very dazzling streaks in the sky. That's what they say. But to actually go see it, it's rather elusive. Sometimes you can faintly see a little bit of color, and sometimes you don't see anything, and it's rather unpredictable. But if you're lucky enough to see it in its full glory, it's quite spectacular. Now, this is not why I'm recommending going kayaking at night, because you can see the Northern Lights on land as well as you can see them on water. There's an equally elusive and unpredictable phenomenon. It's called bioluminescence. And this occurs from microorganisms in water that have a tendency to glow when they're stimulated. And so if you're paddling a kayak, you take a stroke in the water and you see your stroke outlined as a glow, which quickly fades away until your next stroke occurs. That's what it does ideally, nice, bright, brilliant glow in the water kind of thing. But like the Northern Lights, sometimes it's not quite there and sometimes it's not there at all, and it's rather unpredictable. There are certain geographical areas where it tends to occur more frequently. I think places in Florida and the Seattle area, better chances than most for seeing bioluminescence. It doesn't look nearly as dramatic from the shore, like trying to throw rocks in the water. The best way to experience it is from a kayak. So this is a very good reason to try kayaking at night. I will give you some tips on night paddling. First of all, you're going to need a light. And this is not so much to see where you're going, it's more so that other people can see you. At a number of the events I've gone to, they'll do night paddles, and commonly they'll hand out those glow sticks, the chemical sticks you break, and then people stick it on their PFD or onto the deck of their kayak. And it works okay for other kayaks, seeing where people are. I don't like them for one reason. They're disposable and they end up in a landfill somewhere, but they're not really bright enough for, say, motorboats and things. Now, the Coast Guard has a very long list of requirements for every vessel on the water, from big ships to tugboats to barges and sailboats and everything. And there's a whole protocol for white lights and red and green lights, and if you're underway, you have these lights, but if you're just anchored somewhere, it's this light, and if it's a sailing vessel, you have various combinations of lights. But it all boils down at the bottom to it's for manually powered vessels like kayaks that are under 20 feet long or something like that. They have it worded. It says that you have to carry a white light that shall be exhibited in sufficient time to prevent collision. It's very clever wording there, because if your little glow stick was seen by the motorboat and they swerved and didn't hit you, then you're legal. You're okay. But if they ran over you, then by definition, it was not deployed in sufficient time to prevent a collision, so you weren't legal. So I find that I don't trust glow sticks if I'm going to be in areas with more than just like other kayaks. Well, back in the late 1990s, when I started kayaking, the flashlight state-of-the-art was growing by leaps and bounds, and it was hard to stay up on the latest thing. A company out of New Jersey called Princeton Tech did a number of innovations with lights back then, and I think of it as I was on the Princeton Tech subscription plan, because they would come out with some new headlamp, and then within 6 months or a year, they'd come out with a cooler one, and then you had to get the next cooler one. So they started with, you could get a waterproof one that you could, like a headlamp thing, elastic band that go around your head. I discovered the hard way that will fall off if you try to roll at night, and I've donated a Princeton Tech headlamp to the river gods on the Delaware River. It's down there in the mud somewhere still. But Then they got the LED bulbs that were a lot brighter and lasted longer. And then they went into, you had ones that would go red or white. You had options for the color of light that came out. And then they had ones that would go different levels and dimmable ones. And then it was the nickel metal hydrogen batteries came in there somewhere. Then they went to lithium ion batteries. And so it was very, very difficult to get the latest, best one because they kept coming out with a better one after that. So you ended up with a big collection of all these obsolete flashlights. So I remember at Princeton Tech, they had one, it was like the all-around light, it can be seen from 360 degrees. So it was a little 2AA thing with sort of a cone on the end of it. And you could attach that to your PFD, but that doesn't allow someone to see it from 360 degrees. So you can put it on your deck, but you're still going to be blocking it at some point. And there was another company that made a similar one. It was a longer thing. It took 3 AAs. I think it was Tech Light or something like that. And I came up with a system where I could take either one of those and I lashed it to an old piece of a tent pole, like a 2-piece, with the elastic in the middle. It would go together to be about 3 feet long. And I would stick that down the back of my PFD, which would leave the light maybe about 6 inches over my head, which could be seen all around. And it was fairly effective. And notice how the requirement for the Coast Guard does not mean you have to have it on all the time. You just have to be able to turn it on in time to prevent a collision. So if you want to go stealth like me, having it on a pole down your PFD means you can reach up and turn it off and turn it on at will. If you stick one on the end of your kayak, you can't reach it to turn it off if you want to go stealth. So in order to be even cooler, I did get a red and green light. It took, I think, each color took 3 AAs, but you put that on the deck and you have red on the left side, green on the right side, and then people can tell at a distance which way you're headed, how you're pointed. And then I would also could bring a headlamp on as well. So I had the overhead white light and then the headlamp on and then the red and green on the deck, and I felt I was all lit up nice and bright. They also made strobe lights, like 2 AA strobe thing. You put that on your PFD. And I recall meeting someone one time, and we were describing paddling at night, and he said it was he had to do some cross some big river or something. And it maybe got after dark, and he wasn't prepared for it, but so just to be sure, he turned on his strobe light to make the crossing so he could be seen that way. And I told him, I guarantee you nobody saw your strobe light. He did not know that on the water, a flashing white light is the same as a distress signal. And so if some mariner had seen that, they would have come to his rescue because that would be indicating I'm in trouble. But he wasn't aware of that, so I told him, no, don't turn that thing on unless you really want help. So I started paddling out alone, and how they say you don't paddle by yourself, it's not as safe, but we all want to do that at some point. And so I have a recommendation for night paddling if you're paddling alone, and that is don't go where you don't know. In other words, paddle places in the daylight and get very familiar with them, then you're ready to go at night on your own. If you want to go with a group, you can go places you haven't been before, but be quite familiar with the area in lighted conditions before you try it at night by yourself. Now, I paddled for many years in Philadelphia on the Delaware River and all the tributaries of it, and I would often go out at night, and I've had various experiences out there. So I remember one time I'm going down the Delaware along the side, and got my lights on. All my cool lights. I got the red and green. I got the overhead thing. I got the headlamp thing. And so a boat comes down the river and sort of slows down, then doubles back and comes over to the side where I'm at, closer to the edge. And this is I see that out of the shadows, it's a Coast Guard vessel, one of the larger Coast Guard vessels. So they're standing up on their deck and looking. I'm like 3 feet below them in the water, and they're checking me out. So, what are you doing out here? I said, I'm just paddling, I'm just out kayaking here. and they're looking at me, and I've got a PFD on, I've got lights for the nighttime, and there's nothing they can say. They can't kick me off the river. I'm legit. They said, "Oh well, be careful." I said, "All right, thank you very much." Went on paddling. That was that. I have had less pleasant exchanges on the water at night, and I was one time. I'm coming up from downriver, coming around that bend at the southern tip of Philadelphia, and you come up along. There's the Holt terminal there, with shipping terminals on both sides of the river. It's channel depth from shore to shore, New Jersey to Philadelphia to Pennsylvania. So to get through there, there's no shallow area to hang out in. You stay in the shallow stuff that the ships can't get to you, so you're totally out of their way. But along there, it's channel depth all the way across. So I got all my lights on, and there's some traffic here and there. There's a tug goes through and ships docked on the side, but you sort of see it's not nearly as busy as, say, like the New York Harbor. So I see that it looks pretty quiet at the moment. So I start paddling around. I think it was maybe a ship on the side, on the Philadelphia side. I had to go around. It was docked, and so I'm coming through there, and it takes me 5 minutes to kind of get through that area. So a tugboat starts. I hear a tugboat behind me coming up. And then I noticed that there's my shoulders are glowing. I'm turning around. He's got his spotlight pointed right at me. So I'm keep on paddling as best I can. Trying to get out of his way as quickly as possible. And I finally get up to the end of that dock, and then it goes over to there's some piers coming out. It's shallower water, so I'm out of his way. So I proceed up the river. I'm going up to past the Walt Whitman Bridge down to the Ben Franklin Bridge, get out at Penn Treaty Park, one of my favorite takeouts. And I've got my radio. I listen to the radio traffic. And so this tug captain, he calls the Coast Guard a few minutes later, and he says, there's some nut out here in a canoe or something, and he's got no lights. He's in the channel. Can't you get these idiots, keep them off the river? And the Coast Guard dispatcher says, "Sir, we can't deny them access to the river." I'm thinking, yeah, tell them. So I later on contacted the Coast Guard myself and said, look, I had lights on. I was in the channel because I couldn't be out of the channel right there, and I was going through as fast as I can, and I wasn't trying to be a nuisance or anything. And they said, yeah, whatever. So I imagine it would have been more appropriate to do a security call right before I went through there to let all the tugs in the area know, this is the kayak, and he's got a radio, and he's just treasuring the area as quickly as possible. But usually I stay off the channels to keep the chatter down. But that time I probably should have said something. And I think a week later that I saw that tug came by in the daytime, and he slowed down, stopped, he opened his window and was giving me an earful I almost ran you over there. And I said, no. I think I tried to call him on the radio as he went away. I said, calling. It was a tug, Thomas Moran or whatever the name of his tug was. He wasn't listening, or he didn't want to talk to me. He didn't respond, so I couldn't defend myself directly, verbally. But that was that. So, well, looking back on it, as cool as I thought I was with all my lights on, the practical reality was that in Philadelphia, along those docks there, you've got the lights of the city, and you've got street lamps all up and down the docks. And so against that background, my little teeny AA stuff is virtually invisible. It doesn't even show up with the other light reflecting above it. So I was, for all practical purposes, didn't really have any lights on. And so if he had run me over, I would have been illegal because my lights were not sufficient to prevent a collision. Didn't meet the Coast Guard requirements. Now, another time up at Penn Treaty Park, I was putting in at night, and this is just above the Ben Franklin Bridge in Philadelphia. You can paddle across and go up the Cooper River, or you can head downstream on the Delaware, and lots of great stuff to do. So I get the kayak. This is my folding kayaks. I put it together on the shore, and there's, I see that a ship might go past, or a tugboat or something there's a little bit of traffic in the river, but it's mostly quiet. And the channel comes, if they, depending on where they take the route, they can come fairly close to the shore there, within 50 feet or so, because it's deep that close. And so I got the kayak all put together, and I'm looking up the river to see if it's clear. And I see, I see up there's something coming down. There's like something, maybe two. There's two things, like some boat and then something else behind it. And so a tugboat is all lit up. They've got their whole area with work lights for the crew and everything. And so there's not just the navigation lights, the red and green, but all these other lights around. It's kind of a bright thing that comes along. Ships can be the bridge of the ship is lit up like that. So I'm looking up there. There's a one white light coming. That, I don't know, it's a sailboat or something. It's kind of tall up in the air, and then there's the bridge of a ship way farther back. So I'm looking at it and thinking, okay, the first one comes by, maybe I'll go right after that, and get between them two. And it only takes a minute or two to get across the river, so I can run between there because I want to get out, and start paddling and having fun. So I'm looking into the darkness, and this white light is this tall, up high white light is coming down the river, and it passes. And then I'm looking into the darkness, and I see that I thought there was this, one boat in front of another boat. No, it's all one boat. It's a ship. And in between that one single white light way up high is about 100 or 150 feet of ship. And then behind is the bridge with all the lit up for the stuff back there. And if I had tried to run between them, I would smack into the steel side of the ship, and it would have been not too pretty. So I learned something there about how the perception of things at night. Things that can seem, the distances can be very different. Other times you'll see like a white light in the distance, and I'll think, let me just paddle that. And you paddle and paddle and paddle and paddle. It's still there in the distance if it's not an area you're familiar with. So there's one other. This is a scary story, and didn't involve me, fortunately, but in the book that Sea Kayaker magazine put out, they're compiling all their disaster articles and the analysis of what went wrong. So this book was co-written by George Grunseth, who I've mentioned before from Kayak Academy in Seattle area. And so there's one story in this book. It's called Sea Kayaker Deep Trouble is the name of the book. And so it describes some kayakers in New York Harbor on the Hudson there, around New York. And that Hudson is far more intense than Philadelphia waters. The current's a lot faster. You cannot paddle against the full current. And there's a lot more boat traffic going on in there. And so these guys are out paddling at night. And suddenly, out of the darkness, it's the side of a barge. Now, like the front of a barge, it's angled forward, so it'll just push you right underwater if it runs you over. And this thing that just appears out of nowhere, and they survive, but it was pretty bad. I don't know. I forget if they got knocked underneath the water or what went on. And so the thing passed it, and there's whatever's pushing it isn't lit up either. This thing is completely dark, and they figured later maybe there's smuggling activity going on around New York. There's underworld kind of things happening. So it might have been something like that. But it was that to me is terrifying, that I'm going to be out at night and not even have any lights to warn me that I'm going to get run over by a big slab of steel from the front of a barge. But yes, there are dangerous things can happen out there. You can avoid that if you stay in the areas not frequented by barges, ships, and tugs. So here, another very good reason to try night paddling is a full moon that rises on the horizon after the sun sets. Beautiful sight. And if you get it right, you get a clear night, you get a good angle to see the moon at, and you paddle out there, and then up it comes. So that is worth paddling at night for. Other reasons to paddle at night. Well, the wildlife that you can encounter, it's a whole different set of animals at night. You like beavers and things like that. I've paddled up streams at night, and you see the beaver activity. You can't see much, but they'll be there running around, splashing away from your, startling them. And I suppose that one could take night vision goggles. Actually, night vision goggle technology it's like flashlights. It's improved by leaps and bounds over from 20, 30 years ago. I haven't tried it myself. Night vision stuff can be rather expensive. I don't know how waterproof it is, and my understanding also you don't get your full peripheral vision with night vision goggles. But I'm sure you could probably see some interesting things you wouldn't otherwise notice if you had kayaked with night vision goggles. Maybe the military's got some outfits for small watercraft. I don't know. One of the things I like about paddling at night is that in the daytime, like in the summertime, you've got lots of other traffic out there, and people like those annoying jet skis and things. Well, jet skis, my understanding is they are not allowed to be out after dark. So, not that sometimes they don't break the law, but you generally don't have those annoying jet ski issues when you paddle at night, which is, I find, to my liking. And still another reason to enjoy paddling at night. In the daytime, under sunny skies, there is a process called UV degradation, where the sunlight will fade all your equipment over time. And there's that 303 protectant that they recommend putting on dry scoot gaskets and other things. But a kayak will fade, especially leave it on your car, and so you're not even paddling. The sunlight's gonna hit it, and day after day for months, for years, that the sun will just fade stuff and weaken things. You can see the PFDs and wetsuits and things all faded from the sunlight. So you can put this protectant stuff on it. And here's another tip from me. To buy the actual 303 protectant, you get it at marine stores or hardware stores sometimes have it, and it's formulated. It's like SPF. It's like suntan lotion for your stuff. And they sell it for car owners, put it on car tires and things, and it keeps the sun from fading that. But I have found that there's other brands that are less expensive, and in fact, you go to the dollar stores. And sometimes, the stock can vary, but I found a little bottle, like a 3 or 4 ounce bottle for $1 at the dollar stores of the UV protectant. The active ingredient, whatever it's called, it's the same stuff. Whereas the 303, that can be, I don't know, $10, $12 for a 10 ounce bottle or something like that. So you save money going to the dollar store. Anyway, needless to say, if you paddle at night, you don't have to worry at all about UV degradation because the moon's not going to do that to your gear. So, to channel your inner vampire, I suggest trying kayaking at night. And I will, meanwhile, channel my inner Kivitok. In 2006, a fine vocalist from Greenland named Kimmernaq put out her first CD entitled Tunisat. Tunisat could translate to your gift, your present, perhaps. And she had a song on this CD entitled Kivitok. And the lyrics go, Kivitok is a person who was pushed away, then left to become an outcast, to live entirely lonely. If the Kivitok met another Kivitok, then they would fight over spirits and power. And the chorus goes, the shaman would always know the truth. The shaman would always know the truth. And the next verse, down at the beach, running down there, trying to catch a reindeer, what endurance and power, oh, what claws and scary eyes. And repeating the chorus, the shaman would always know the truth. So this is my version of Kivitok, originally done by Kimmernaq.
Inoka timinit ayane karu kanga kima sara Kivitok Kivitoka mit napit sigur Ganga ila palesarat anesat bishluit Angaku biviusok nalungika Angaku biviusok nalungika Sisa kutakana pengolito akana chuchut besarniara Okela susesua pingina nesua kokisui esesuya Angaku viviuso nalungika Angaku viviusok nalungika Angaku viviusok nalungika Angaku viviusok nalungika
The song is called Kimmernaq, and the original singer is Kimmernaq, Kimmernaq. And she still performs these days. She often is the MC on stage at the Tivoli Amusement Park when they have the Greenland and Tivoli Day on the 1st of August every summer. I believe this album, Tunisat, is out of print. She did a second album some years after that first one. The second was called Uani. It's quite good as well. But if you want to hear that Kimmernaq song, she has still available a DVD of live performance in 2007, and she performs that song Kimmernaq. And the last somebody checked for me on the atlanticmusic.gl, you can get that DVD, I think, for like less than $10. Quite a bargain. So check out that. It's called Kimmernaq Live DVD. Kimmernaq. And if you want the fullest depiction of a Kimmernaq, you want to see the movie. It's called Heart of Light. This was done in 1998, filmed in Greenland with Greenlandic actors, done in Greenlandic with English subtitles. And I don't know if that's still available anywhere, but Heart of Light, starring Rasmus Lubeth, the very fine Greenlandic singer. And the Kimmernaq characters is depicted quite extensively in this film. And not to get too confusing, but there's another film that was done quite a bit after the Heart of Light one I just mentioned. And this one's called Qakat Alangui, Qaqqat Alannngui. It's a scary film, filmed in Greenland with Greenlandic actors with English subtitles. And that film actually uses this Kimmernaq song in the soundtrack. And you can get the soundtrack CD of that from atlanticmusic.gl. So another way to get that Kimmernaq song, the original recording by Kimmernaq. Coming up in episode 37, I will talk about the different teams at the competition in Greenland and how they encourage their fellow competitors with their own little personalized sound bites. And we'll meet a guy named Isaias, who's quite the character. So until next time, this is Dubside signing off. Kimmernaq.